προστατευτεί εθνικά. Θα πρέπει να υπάρξουν ευρωπαϊκές πολιτικές που θα δώσουν λύσεις. Η Νέα Δημοκρατία στην Ελλάδα, η CDU στη Γερμανία, δηλαδή το Ευρωπαϊκό Λαϊκό Κόμμα σε κάθε ευρωπαϊκή χώρα, ως η μεγαλύτερη πολιτική οικογένεια στην Ευρώπη, οφείλουμε να βρούμε τις λύσεις που θα δώσουν πίσω στους πολίτες το αίσθημα της ασφάλειας που τόσο έχουν ανάγκη. Στο πλαίσιο αυτό, υπό την αιγύδα του Ευρωπαϊκού Λαϊκού Κόμματος, η Γραμματεία Διεθνών Σχέσεων και Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης της Νέας Δημοκρατίας, σε συνεργασία με τον Ιστό Δημοκρατίας Κωνσταντίνος Καραμανλής, διοργανώνουμε σήμερα μια εκδήλωση με θέμα «Εγγυόμαστε την ασφάλεια της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, χτίζουμε το κοινό μας μέλλον». Έχουμε τη χαρά και την τιμή να έχουμε μαζί μας τη Γερμανίδα Υπουργό Άμυνας, Dr. Ursula von der Leyen, τον Πρόεδρο της Νέας Δημοκρατίας, τον κύριο Κυριάκο Μητσοτάκη, για να μας δώσουν τη δική τους οπτική πάνω σε αυτό το θέμα, και μετέπειτα θα ακολουθήσει και συζήτηση την οποία θα συντονίσει ο δημοσιογράφος Άγγελος Αθανασόπουλος. Θα ξεκινήσουμε με κάποιες αρχικές εισηγήσεις από τους δύο κεντρικούς ομιλητές. Οπότε καλώ τον Πρόεδρο της Νέας Δημοκρατίας, Κυριάκο Μητσοτάκη, στο βήμα για την αρχική του εισήγηση.
First of all, I want to make sure that the translation is not working. If it is not working, I will switch into English. So, we have the translator for the next. Okay, I'll speak it. Not a problem. So, I presume that's not going to be very difficult for the audience to follow. Minister, it's a real pleasure to have you in Athens. And a real privilege that you can be with us. And I'm sure we will have a very interesting debate about issues that are of common interest. I would first of all like to point out to our audience that the Minister is a very distinguished German politician, head of the ministry since 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And very actively promoting the concept of a stronger European Defence Union. I should also add that I am particularly proud of the fact that she has been able to combine a very, very successful political career with raising 7 children. She's the mother of 7 children. Which makes this all the more relevant, given that today in Parliament we had a very interesting debate about how we can change Greek demographics and how we can encourage Greeks to have more children. So thank you, Minister, for being with us. I'll say a few introductory words about 2 topics which I think are going to be particularly relevant for our discussion, and then we can pick up on those subjects in the debate that we will have. Issues that have to do with defense and security. Why are they relevant for the European People's Party? Why are they relevant for Greece? For 2 reasons. First of all, Greece is a border country. And has suffered the most from the migration crisis of 2015. It is only natural that Greece should be at the front seat in the debate that is already taking place within the European Union regarding how we can better protect our borders. Unfortunately, this is a debate that the current Syriza government is not willing to have. It's not willing to have this debate simply because it does not consider border protection to be a priority for our country. And this is a pity. It's a pity because we cannot contemplate a union of free movement of people without making sure that as a European Union we protect our borders, and we do it so effectively. And we do it through joint burden sharing and through active European participation. And that is why we, as Nea Demokratia, have supported the proposals of the Commission for the very quick deployment of a European border protection force that will number 10,000 people. The sooner the better the sooner this will happen, the better it will actually be for Greece. And we certainly want to be at the front seat when issues related to our common migration policy are discussed. We need a common asylum policy as a European Union. We can no longer allow these policies of asylum shopping to continue uninterrupted. But unfortunately, on this topic as well, Greece has not been particularly active within the European debate. Lastly, on this issue, I would like to once more raise the issue of burden sharing and European solidarity amongst all European Union countries. And I'm doing this on a day that is important in the sense that Democratia has decided, through a letter that was sent out yesterday by me to Joseph Daul, to publicly raise the issue of the public statements made by our Hungarian colleagues at Fidesz regarding the issues of migration and the issues of the rule of law. I'll be very, very open with you. We all advocate that we need to protect our borders. But when it comes to burden sharing, it is very difficult for a border country such as Greece to accept that another European country, which is also benefiting from common European policies, is not willing to participate at all in European burden sharing schemes when it comes to the relocation of refugees. And I'm talking about refugees. I'm not talking about illegal migrants. Now, the second topic we would like to discuss is a topic of how we further advanced the issue of a common defense policy. This is important for Greece because Greece is one of the few countries within the European Union that actually spends more than 2% of its budget, of its GDP, on defense. Yet it has not actively participated in the discussion regarding strengthening the pillars, the institutional pillars of a common European defense policy. It has not been particularly active in the discussion surrounding PESCO, the one institutional instrument that we currently have that is promoting European cooperation at the defense level, and does not seem to me to be actively participating in this discussion regarding the European streamlining of procurement, but also division of labor when it comes to better exploiting the capabilities of our defense industry. This is a discussion that Greece cannot afford not to participate. I think the minister, in public remarks that has made it very, very clear that European defense structures do not antagonize NATO. NATO has been, for the past 70 years, the pillar of peace and stability and a guarantor of the quality of the transatlantic relationship. But there are areas, geographic areas, where Europe may be forced to intervene on its own, such as, for example, Africa, where NATO does not have a natural geopolitical interest. And when we talk about hard power within the European Union, when we talk about the European Union that should punch above its weight and compete effectively in a world of great geopolitical turmoil, a stronger defense cooperation, in my mind, is an absolute necessity. And Greece should be very, very active in this discussion in the future. So these are two topics which I'd be very, very happy to further discuss with the minister in the upcoming discussion. These are two topics which are very important for the European People Party and its agenda as it moves towards the European elections. And I'm looking forward with great interest to the comments that the minister will make. I welcome her again to Athens, and please join me in a warm round of applause for our distinguished guest. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's always wonderful to be back in Athens, the cradle of our democracies. And your words of introduction gave me the association of the cradles in demography, I could tell you a little bit more about that, what conciliation of work and family is, but this is not the topic of today. So thank you very much for inviting me. It is good to be here in the place where actually Manfred Weber started his campaign in December last year. And it's true, we at EPP are called upon to show bold leadership and resolve. As the European election approach, we need to stand up to our values. And for that, I commend you, Kyriakos and the Nea Demokratia, because you have presented a pragmatic and a bold program, a bold reform agenda with a strong social footprint that serves as an example for the EPP family. It is the only way to create good jobs and growth. And this is our aim. This is also the vision of Manfred Weber. And this is what the program of you consists. So congratulations on this reform agenda. About the future of European defense. When I was born, the European Union had a different name and consisted of just 6 member states. Today, we have 28 member states. I was born and I grew up in Brussels. And at the time in school, my friends and my schoolmates were Italian, Spanish, Dutch, French, and Belgian. And to us, the European idea of united in diversity was basically an everyday experience. To see today how far we have come in the European Union fills me with pride and fills me with a lot of joy, because the Europe we live in today is one of a kind. It stands for long-lasting peace. It stands for freedom. It stands like no other region in this globe for reconciliation and friendship. And it is our answer to 2 centuries of wars and violence all over our continent. We created a European Union with free trade all across the member states, with a common currency, with freedom of movement. So Europe is a real success story, and often I think we're talking too much about that, the glass is half full. No, the glass is only full if we really think about the vision we want to make out of Europe, and we have to talk about the successes this process has brought along. The European GDP is roughly 13 trillion euros. We are number 2 in the world. We are larger than China, for example, in the GDP. We're second after the United States. And Europe is a trade giant. We represent only 7% of the world's population, but we're managing 15% of the worldwide import-export trade. Europe is a success story of free trade. The proof is that if you look at other countries that are standing in line to have free trade agreements with the European Union. In other words, we are respected and we know our interests in the economic power play. And I'm very much convinced, to be honest, that Greece deserves a strong part in this success story. Greece has enormous potential. Greek politics could do better. And I know that you, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, you will be the one who is actively shaping the new success story as a future prime minister. This is the goal we are working for. I think also that now it is time to step up to write another success story, and that would be, in my view, the success story of a common European foreign policy and a common European defense policy. There are many challenges around us, and I think on the panel we'll talk about it. It's Russia's violation of international laws. We talk about transnational terrorism. We're talking about cyber threats. China's growing economic influence, its military power, and its digital potential. We have threats from inside, the growing right-wing populism in Europe, We're talking about the Brexit. You know all these topics too well, and I think at the panel we'll have a chance to debate about it in depth. It is not only the single member state that has to deal with these topics, but it's Europe that has to rise to these challenges. And as European Union, we have not only to be willing, but we have also to be able to act when it is necessary. And that's why we created the European Defence Union. We call it PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation in Defence, in December 2017. It is the starting point of the European Defence Union. That is, PESCO is the binding and ambitious framework of 25 European nations. Together we fill capability gaps of our armed forces. We coordinate European defence planning. And thus, we are finally overcoming the fragmentation we've seen in the past in the 28 armed forces we have in the European Union, which is an intolerable waste of money and resources. It was long overdue to overcome this fragmentation. Overcoming fragmentation is also the centerpiece of the new so-called European Defence Fund. For the first time ever, there's European funding, European money for defense, for common research, common development and procurement. 13 billion euros are in the European Defence Fund up to 2027. In other words, it's a huge incentive to procure together, to organize logistics, to train together, and to go on missions together. And to be clear at this point, and thank you that you mentioned it, all these important improvements are of benefit for NATO. They are complementary for NATO. NATO will always be collective defense for us. This is for sure, without any doubt. It's always going to be Article 5. But there are other fields, as you mentioned, where I do not see NATO. For example, in our African neighborhood, I do not see NATO. But there is a strong need for Europe to show commitment, and then Europe has to be able to act when it's being called upon. This is why we strengthen our ability to make a difference in regions where our security interests are at stake. This is why we need the European Defence Union, and this is why we remain transatlantic, while we are becoming more European. There's still a lot of work to do. For example, we have to define the European Union's foreign policy in the international arena in the same manner as we are doing now in defense policy. If you look at your immediate neighborhood, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, many European nations are engaged, they are militarily engaged, but where is the European foreign policy of relevance? Now that the political process gets more and more important in Syria, I want to see a coherent European foreign policy that says very clearly we will engage in rebuilding the country, in rebuilding Syria, only if all refugees can come back home to their home country, those who fled from ISIL, as well as those who fled from Assad. This has to be the clear signal in the political process for me. A political process that means reconciliation, reconstruction, and inclusive political participation, and all those means that are necessary for it. Diplomacy, reconstruction money, and military stability are means in the hands of the European Union. Therefore, in sum, I expect from the next Commission that our foreign policy should be one solid piece of music, and I expect that there is now time to seek the introduction of majority decisions in foreign policy. We have to speak with one voice. And dear friends, we are doing all this because of one fundamental belief. We are sharing the belief in our democratic values, such as the rule of law, plurality, tolerance, and the most important of all, the dignity of every single human being. And this is the reason why, to me, the European Union is indispensable in shaping the course of the world. Europe is the vanguard of a vibrant multilateralism. We know we do better when we work together, stronger together. This is our lesson learned from 2 horrible world wars, and this is what the European experience is built upon. The construction of our European Union is a shining example, 28 nations, a shining example that multilateralism does work. And the European Union is a responsible neighbor, because we know that Europeans are safe and Europe is strong when our region is at peace. We know that we are better off if our neighbors are okay. We know that Europe is safe and strong when international laws and agreements are respected. We know that rules are not something to limit each other, but that rules are the guarantee that all of us play by the same game. Our history has shaped the European Union. We built our union on win-win solutions, not on zero-sum games, and we seek relations on the basis of mutual respect. And now look at our opponents, from the far left or the right-wing populists, and you name it, be it Le Pen in France, be it Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, it was Farage in the UK, the AfD in Germany, or Cinque Stelle, or Lega Nord in Italy, or be it the Golden Dawn here, you name it. As different as all these right-wing populists are with their names and with their topics, there's one thing they do have in common. They want to demolish Europe, they want to destroy Europe, and will never let that happen, dear friends. We will never let that happen because the world needs a strong European Union more than ever now. The world needs a strong supporter of multilateralism. The world needs a global force for peace, a global economy for peace. Because whatever the Brexit process will bring along, we will stay the second largest world economy, and we will stay the largest market in the world. The world needs a supporter and a superpower that sticks to its words and to the agreements it has signed. Countries that are undergoing major political change do know that the European Union stands ready as a trusted negotiator, a proven companion for transitions in democracy, and a strong trading and investment partner. In other words, the world needs a European Union that is reliable, that is predictable, that is solid, that is cooperative, that is strong, and that is united. This is the Europe we are fighting for. It comes down to us, all of us here in the room. It comes down to all of us, the 28 member states of the European Union, the 500 million people living in a united Europe. It comes down to us. This is our Europe we are fighting for right now in this campaign. These are the European values the EPP stands for, and this is our common future Neo-Democratia is working for. So thank you for your attention, and let's go to work for a solid and successful campaign. Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
No, I will speak.
So, good evening to everybody. I was asked to speak in English, so I hope this is okay. My name is Angelos Athanasopoulos. I would like, first of all, to thank, on my part, the Secretariat of International Relations of Nea Demokratia, above all the President, who made me the honor to invite me here to moderate this discussion. I would like to start a short series of questions for both the Minister and the President, and then, if time allows us, we can open the floor for questions. So, Minister, I would like to start from you and ask you, you have talked extensively on your vision for the future of European defense. So I would like to ask you, what role do you see in this vision for Germany and Greece, possibly together?
I do see a strong role because, first of all, it is for us in Germany absolutely clear, never ever alone. So we're always working in alliances or in a union as the European Union is. And I think as the European Union, or as a country like Germany within the European Union, we are now, as I said, an economic superpower with a lot of political influence, but we need to be able to take on responsibility in our neighborhood as a European Union. And we're working in the European Defense Union very closely together with Greece. If I may say so, Greece is a very active partner. And it's good to see that you're joining the different PESCO projects within the European Defense Union. It's necessary to have strong partners at our side. I was already saying that I think Greece has an enormous potential. It could do better, but I'm very positive and I'm very eager to listen to you, what your thoughts are about how to improve the things and to do better and to be more active. But it is necessary to have those two countries with very different experiences shaping the goals we do have in the European Defense Union and putting on emphasis on a common foreign policy with one voice for the European Union. So there's a lot to do together, and I hope for the future.
Mr. President, you mentioned that Greece is a border country for the EU, facing many challenges. Challenges which touch upon security, but also challenges which touch upon investment, which is one of your most highlighted issues for the next day when you become Prime Minister, which I hope is soon. My question is, how are you planning to tap in the European Defence Fund and actually boost the Greek defence industry and also create jobs and also enhance Greek defence capabilities?
Well, first of all, you're right to point out that the number one priority for Greece the next day is attracting investment, domestic and foreign. Investment is going to create jobs. Jobs are absolutely necessary to pull us out of this crisis. And only through an investment-driven growth will Greece be able to attain growth rates that significantly exceed what we achieve today. With 1.5% to 2% growth, we are not really converging with the rest of Europe. We're not making up for the lost ground. We need much higher growth than that. It needs to be investment-driven. And of course, defense capabilities and investment in defense can play its own very, very important role in contributing towards our total investment portfolio. We have a defense industry that is currently struggling. And one of the first priorities of the next government would be an honest assessment of our real capabilities and a restructuring of our defense industry in order for it to be able to participate in the European value chain, especially in aerospace. We have a lot of capabilities, and I think we can do much better. And it is up to the government, the Ministry of Defense, but also the leadership and the management of our large state-owned defense companies to identify those European projects that can be funded through the European Defense Fund, where we as Greece can add value. We are spending a lot of money on defense as a percentage of GDP, much more so than Germany. And I very much welcome the commitment by the German government to gradually increase its defense spending in order to get to the point where it will be spending 2% of its GDP on defense. It would be good if this were to happen, obviously, faster. But it is a definite movement in the right direction. Again, where do we participate in the European value chain is a question of identifying the capabilities where we can add real value and also tying it in our own domestic priorities. Let me give you one example of a project that is of particular interest to me. It should be of particular interest to Greece, and I think it would add value to a European project that should be an area of priority. Technologies surrounding better management of borders, be it software monitoring capabilities, new generation of drones. These are technologies that will be necessary and that will facilitate better management of a complicated border, because most of our border is a sea border that poses its own logistical problems, more difficult to manage and to patrol than your typical land border. So we have the capabilities and the ability to find the projects of common European interest that can be funded through the European Defence Fund that will play into our comparative advantage and that will add value in a Europe that is forced to move much more towards streamlining its defense capabilities. You always mention your nice example of how many different types of tanks we have in Europe compared to what the Americans or the Chinese have. It's very clear that we cannot proceed in that direction. So scale and more cooperation and more streamlining is going to be necessary. It's also going to be necessary for our industries, for our defense industries to survive and thrive.
Thank you. If I may add that, thank you for mentioning those examples, because this is exactly the point where the opportunity of the European Defence Union lies. If you look at the European Defence Fund, as I've said, the first time European money as an incentive, if you procure together, you'll have 30% of the cost being covered by the European Defence Fund. And the effect now is, we're working, for example, on the Future Combat Air System, which will be the incentive for European industries to step up in the air fighter business, which will have a huge impact on the civil airline development too. And the good part is, as it's concentrated on the European industry basis, immediately the excellence of Greece in this field will have a huge opportunity to join with its part in the European procurement development or the Future Combat Air System development, as it's going to be an airplane that, where I'm convinced, most of the European countries will join this next program. And I've seen that for our industries, it's crucial to have these incentives, to have these procurements as a boost for the civil industry too, because it's the next step to the next generation of airplanes that is being made possible then by governmental money of many different member states, and that should be our common interest to join there with our small and medium industry.
And it's important that these decisions are, that progress is made on that front before important procurement decisions are actually taken. Greece does not yet have the ability, the financial capacity to make a decision in terms of next generation fighter jets. At some point, it will need to make this decision. And if the timing were appropriate to tap into a common European project where we could actually participate to the extent of our capacity, this would clearly be a win-win solution for everyone.
I would like to ask you, and this question goes to both of you, if you think that building on the European Defence Fund, we can build on Europe's strategic autonomy, and especially when we touch upon hard security issues. For example, I would like to give you an example. recently, last week, we had the announcement of gas discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean. These are actually European resources. And maybe in this troubled neighborhood, as the minister mentioned, maybe at some point Europe will need to make some decisions. So would you say that by coming together, tapping in the European Defence Fund, you create a culture that could possibly be used later to defend ourselves?
Yes, this is many interesting questions for a very crucial topic. First of all, you were talking about European autonomy, strategic autonomy. And you're mentioning the European Defence Fund. In one point, I would say yes, and it's crucial. I give you an example. That is the example of the Euro drone. We could have bought, as Europeans, an American drone system of the next generation or an Israel drone system of the next generation. Why didn't we do so? Because if we would have done so, the Americans or the Israelis would have been the masters of what we see and where we fly. And strategic autonomy means that we decide as Europeans if we go on missions, for example, with a drone, what we see and where we fly. But it has even more impact because producing a Euro drone as Europeans through the European Defence Fund, what we are doing right now, means that we secure the industrial knowledge about how to develop drones here in Europe. It costs us a lot, and it takes time to develop the Euro drone. But I'm convinced it's a good step forward because the drone business, if I may call it that way, the drone business will be all over the place in the civil world. It's one of the technologies of the future, transportation or whatever is necessary. So the unmanned airplanes will be a big topic of the future. And therefore, investing in the Eurodrone means investing in the industrial basis of Europe for the future. And this, of course, increases strategic autonomy. On your other question concerning the gas resources found in the exclusive economic zone, I think this is another sheet of paper. This is a sheet of paper where I expect Europe, and this is for sure, to show clear solidarity that with Cyprus, for example, that we have to play by international laws and rules in that area. Of course, it has to be a process that is under the umbrella of the United Nations always, but this is a matter of abiding to international laws, yes or no. And we are always on the side of those who say we have created a structure, a peace structure of international rules and international laws for good reasons. Because we're doing better if we have rules that everybody plays by the same game. And in a case of issues or problems, as it is down there, there is one international law and international rules that have to be abided. So therefore, the position of Europe is very clear on that.
I'm glad you mentioned the importance of international law when it comes to protecting the sovereign rights of the Republic of Cyprus. It is very important that this is actually mentioned and mentioned publicly, especially at the time when Turkish behavior in this part of the world is becoming increasingly aggressive. Two quick points to respond to your question and your comments. And I'd like to come back to an issue you touched upon in your introductory remarks. Defense cooperation is important, but it needs to go hand in hand with a common foreign policy for the European Union. On its own, it will not lead us very far. I've taken note of the point you have made regarding the ability to take important foreign policy decisions with qualified majority. It would certainly be, it's an ambitious step that needs to to be obviously discussed. But the truth is that when it comes to important foreign policy decisions, frequently member states are more active in terms of promoting their own interests and think only as a side thought what the European Union would do and how important its influence would be. So we can only talk about a coherent foreign policy and defense approach to the European Union if we also address issues of streamlining our foreign policy decisions. A second area which I would like to touch upon, because it is relevant to the general security context, albeit not that relevant to the hard security issues, has to do with cooperation in civil protection. And there I would like to highlight the work done by Commissioner Stylianidis on the RescEU project. It is a good template of how Europe should be able to pool resources when it comes to addressing issues that have to do with civil protection and national catastrophes. I'm saying this coming from, a southern country that has suffered an incredible tragedy this summer, where 100 people lost their lives in a wildfire very close to Athens. And as climate change makes its presence more felt, the ability to pool resources at the European level is going to be incredibly important. If, for example, we decide as the European Union that we need to purchase firefighting planes, first of all, where do we buy them from? It's a big question. How do we deploy them? How do we better manage them? And how can we share these resources in a more effective manner? It is forcing us to think, outside the context of our own domestic agenda. And I think this is why this whole discussion about the importance of Europe is very relevant in the upcoming European elections. As a general point, I take your optimistic statement about the big success of Europe, which sometimes we take for granted. It was not. It was not taken for granted, decades ago, and especially when we see, a strong cooperation between Greece and Germany. It took, our fathers great resolve to leave behind, the traumas of horrible wars to get to the point where we say we will cooperate in order not only for this never to happen again, but in order to make sure that as a Europe we have a shared and collective identity and responsibility in a changing world. So nothing should be taken for granted. And I think sometimes it may sound almost romantic when we repeat these concepts and stress the importance of where we started, why this common project started, and where we are today. But that is one of the reasons why we should study history more, and why this debate is so important, and why we need to fend off all the forces that want to pull Europe apart in the next elections. And frankly, I think it is narratives of national victimhood and of how Europe is responsible for everything that's wrong in our home countries are just not helpful. Nobody says that Europe has done everything right, and we're the first that need to be in that sense even constructive. I hate to use the word Eurosceptics, but constructive about what we have done wrong. But let's acknowledge what we have done right, and take stock of the tremendous progress that we have made in an experiment of collective cooperation amongst nation states that willingly surrendered their sovereignty. Has never happened in the history of the world. So I'm sort of feel obliged to repeat this, because sometimes I think we don't do enough of it. And I think as we have to fight a tough campaign against populists, not just from the right, but also from the left. Populists from the left, we have them in power in Greece. Maybe they're not that Eurosceptic, but trust me, when it comes to issues of the rule of law, they are, as bad as some of the populists of the right. As we fight this election, we need to come back.
For your words, because 60 years old now, and when I think back, I always lived in peace under the umbrella of the European concept. But I do remember, of course, my parents, a horrible experience coming as a young generation. They were children when the Second World War ended. And at the time, I felt this vibrant urge to maintain this growing peace. They had seen the horrors after the Second World War. And for example, today we have in Germany a very close cooperation with the Dutch army. The Dutch army is submitting its tank battalion, the last tank battalion they have, to the German armed forces. Can you imagine? And the German armed forces submit their parts of their navy to the Dutch armed forces. And if I think back, we were deadly enemies at the end of World War II. And to trust each other so much that we submit our armed forces, there couldn't be a stronger signal for the willingness to have peace together and to turn this world into a better place. But what I also think is that, at least my generation, we are living in a time right now with the growing left and right-wing populism that's goal is to demolish this European Union. That it's up to us again, our generation, to hand over a united and strong Europe to our children. Same chance as us to live under this wonderful security umbrella and these European values we have lived all the time during our lifespan. And if you think of where would we want our children to live in future, when they're not only young and well-educated and healthy, well, then they can live all over the world. But where would we like to live when we're not young, not healthy, not well-educated? I couldn't think of a better place where prosperity go better together than in the European Union. And to hand this for it.
May seize on the comment that you both made on populism and the future of Europe. You very rightly described that populism is actually working through the seams of the European costume, trying to demolish it, as you said. So my question is, how do we find this balance between a Europe which is open, as a proponent of globalization and multilateralism, as you just said, and also trying to protect its citizens, because its citizens seems to need to ask for physical protection, social protection, and the populists are trying actually to seize arguments exactly there. And this is my first point. And the second point, which touches upon what President Mητσοτάκη just said, is that here we have left-wing populists who are testing us on another field, which is the resilience of our rule of law systems, our justice systems, many times using them against their opponents in covert methods sometimes, as we all know. How do we find the balance between openness and protection?
First of all, openness, in my view, is not something which is physical, but it's open-minded. So it's absolutely right that every entity, every union like the European Union has the right and the duty to protect its border, because this is a matter of rules, and it's a matter of control, and it's a matter of laws that has to be abided. Therefore, we have been talking a lot about legal migration, which is a set of rules you abide to, and of course the need to fight illegal migration. Because what does illegal migration mean? It does mean that traffickers are deciding who's coming to Europe. They decide, the strongest and those who are able to pay the most. So we will not pay into the system of traffickers and smugglers, but we have to fight them. We have to work on a system for legal migration that has a clear set of rules by which you can come. But this is talking about the physical aspect. The open society is an open-minded society. An open-minded society, and I'm here, as I said, in the cradle of democracy. An open-minded society that Greece always promoted, the respect for the individual human being, the open-mindedness for new cooperations, new technologies, new ways to tackle the problems of this world together, the open-mindedness of multilateralism, which means I'm able and willing to listen to others and to work together with others without losing my identity, but with being able to work together on problems that we can always only solve together. And this credo for multilateralism, which is a system of, as individual nations or individual organizations like the European Union, being able to cooperate with others, is of high value in a globalized world. I think those who want to demolish Europe, the centerpiece that they are trying to tell us is that we could go on with prosperity in an international or globalized world while tracking back into nationalism and closing down on our national borders, which is an illusion. If you close down, you will never be able anymore to take all the benefits of a globalized world and to be an open-minded, outward-going, curious society for innovation and for opportunities the globalized cooperation gives us. And therefore, I do exactly know what kind of a world I want to live on, and therefore I'm working for that.
I couldn't agree more. Being open-minded and innovative does not mean that you have an open door policy that essentially welcomes everyone who wants to come to the European Union, and sometimes not even through their own will, but through networks that actually push them towards an illusionary world and arriving in the EU without the EU having the ability to accommodate these people. So protecting your borders effectively, making a distinction between legal and orderly migration and managed migration, granting refugees all the rights that stem from the international legal system, but making a distinction between those categories that need protection and those who do not is a fundamental principle. And I think it's good that most important mainstream political forces agree on this. And in that sense, our government, we should not forget that in spite of the overtures that Mr. Tsipras is making towards the socialists of this world, he still belongs to the group of the radical left. That doesn't seem to be a priority for the current government. But following rules, protecting your borders does not mean that you should not embrace openness and innovation. And if you look at the platform that the European People's Party has presented, of course it talks about security and safety, but it also talks about jobs, about the new jobs of the future, how we're going to create them, how we're going to retrain and reskill a working force that needs to adapt to a changing world, how we're going to be at the forefront of the huge technological revolution that is taking place, how we're going to address critical challenges such as climate change, and how are we going to protect our unique way of life, which sometimes cannot be put into words. It's difficult to describe what this European experience is. The best way I can describe it is that if you take a plane and someone blindfolds you and you don't know where you land, you immediately understand if you've landed in a European country, vis-à-vis any other part of the world. And it's, it's an intangible sense of what makes us in Europe proud of national identities and our common European cultural and religious heritage. This is what the EPP is all about. And this is why it's so important that the EPP does well in the upcoming European elections, because the next day is going to be challenging. Coalitions need to be built, and we need to attend these discussions about the future of Europe from a position of strength. That is why we support Manfred Weber for president of the Commission, why we have endorsed the Spitzencandidate process, because we want to add a layer of legitimacy to decisions taken in Brussels. And this is why it's so important to have this debate also at the European level in light of an election, which in the case of Greece, there's a strong possibility that we may have Euro elections coinciding with national elections, but if that doesn't happen, there's certainly going to be a strong political message regarding domestic politics, which will be sent in the European elections, but there is a European angle which we have an obligation not to forget.
I think when you're talking about the specificity of Europe, of feeling European, we all in this room know this. I live in Hanover, which is in Lower Saxony. Mm-hmm. So I can care about my city, Hanover. But of course, as a federal minister, I care and work for the federal government for Germany. At the same time, without any problem, we are enthusiastic here about Europe. And this knowledge of caring for your local entity, being responsible for your country, and this will always stay united in diversity in Europe, and caring for Europe, this is the main task we have, and it's for us Europeans very easy to have this inner feeling and to live up to these values. And I think this is specific for a European feeling you were asking for.
I'm receiving some tight messages that our time is tight. So with this very strong message from both of you for better, stronger and united Europe, united in diversity, I would like to thank Mrs. von der Leyen for being here with us, Mr. President, also for you, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have time for a quick coffee?